Today I am going to be showing you how to use two different writing feedback tracker templates to keep track of and process the feedback that you receive on your academic writing. First up is a tracker that was built in Excel, and we'll go through the 4 sheets that this tracker contains. So the first sheet is called Instructions, and it explains how to use the tracker. So if you forget anything that this video covers, just have a look at the instruction sheet to remind yourself. All right, the first main tab we'll have a look at is this one called Feedback Tracker. Now, this is really the heart of this entire document, so let me show you how to use that. Column A is called Feedback Comment and/or Rubric Score, and this is where you are going to input individual items of feedback, such as marking comments, rubric comments, that you receive on your written work. For example, let's imagine that a marker left the comment, "Try to use more sufficient academic evidence" on your essay. Or another comment they might leave is, "Sentences were difficult to follow," or "Paragraphs were well structured and clear throughout." These are all examples of those kind of comments that you might find either in the margins of your work or in a final comment, sort of in paragraph form at the end of the essay. So break down that feedback piece by piece and add it a row at a time to this sheet of the tracker. Next, you are going to move to the second column, column B, where it says positive or negative. Basically, this is where you categorize the feedback that you've input in terms of whether it's something to improve or it's a good practice to maintain. So try to use more sufficient academic evidence, for example, would be negative feedback, whereas paragraphs were well structured and clear throughout would be positive feedback. The third column, C, is called Writing Skill or Element. This is where you're going to have a think about the comment and try to figure out what kind of skill or element of writing practices it relates to. So you're basically categorizing it. Now, in the drop-down menu, you'll see that there's a number of options ranging from argumentation and critical analysis to transitions and use of literature or evidence. So try to use more sufficient academic evidence would be use of literature and evidence. Sentences were difficult to follow might be an example of editing and proofreading. And paragraphs were well structured and clear would be an example of structure and paragraphs. So get those labeled for yourself. If you're at any point unsure of what these kind of categories mean or what they might include, there's a link over on the right called Making Sense of Feedback tab of the Feedback Decoder Guide that you can go to for some support with that. Finally, there is a date column that you can fill out just so you can keep track of how these comments that you receive evolve over time. Once you've finished updating that sheet, you can move on to the sheet called Areas of Good Practice. This sheet looks very boring at first, but what we're going to do is right-click inside the blue table on the left and then choose the option to refresh. Now, as soon as you pick that refresh option, voila, a pie chart appears and you'll see that it's pulling data from the sheet that you just filled out. So on the left, you'll be able to review a numeric sort of breakdown of what the categories were where you received positive feedback. And on the right, you'll have a visual representation that gives you an idea of strengths that you currently have in your writing or areas where lecturers are telling you, yeah, you're doing a good job. Finally, that leaves us with the Areas for Growth tab, and it's very similar to the prior sheet. Just instead of being focused on the positive feedback, this one pulls together anything that you've added that was negative feedback. So the same thing, if you've added new data, you can right-click, choose Refresh, and it will give you this pie chart that will adapt and evolve as you add more examples to that first sheet. So you'll get your numeric countdown on the left and then your pie chart or visual on the right. What this will help you do ideally is get a sense of the priority areas where you need to be focusing your attention in order to continue improving your marks. Finally, the idea of a feedback tracker is that you continue to add to it throughout your degree. So you're never really finished with a feedback tracker. As you can imagine, that means that it can start to get quite unwieldy. So one thing that you can do to help process this data and make it a little more clear for yourself is go back to the feedback tracker sheet and use the filtering options at the top of each column to just look at a particular kind of data. So you can see what I'm doing here, for example, is I'm going to writing skill or element, and then I'm choosing to filter by just one of the categories, which limits my view. Or another thing I could do is go to the positive or negative column and choose to see only the positive comments or only the negative comments. Next up, we have a different style of writing feedback tracker, this one developed in Word. Again, you will find this linked in the description. So within this tracker, we have 5 columns. The first one is for you to record the module and the assignment. So, Nursing Practices 101, reflective essay, let's say. In the second column, you can record the grade or the score that you received. So let's say this received a 47. Column 3 is for you to record any positive feedback that you received on that essay. So I would recommend that you look through both comments that you might have gotten in the margins, as well as any final end note or rubric that your instructor provided. Okay, so we can see now that some feedback has been added to each of those columns. Positive feedback, like good job in the order and structure of the piece, as well as negative feedback, like you haven't followed Harvard citation style, citations are missing, you needed to support your argument with NHS guidelines, etc. Now, the last step is where you have a look over that positive feedback versus the negative feedback and try to identify the main areas in which you want to improve your writing for next time. So I'd say in this case, we have a couple comments related to citations and referencing. So that would be one major area to improve in. Additionally, we have a comment about using more sufficient academic evidence, and we have a comment about needing to support points with NHS guidelines and policy. So both of those relate to the nature of the literature or the evidence that's being used in the writing. So for the next assignment that I approach, I'm going to want to make sure that I'm supporting my claims with more robust evidence and that I'm also accurately following the style guide when I cite and reference those sources. As you continue to build out the feedback tracker in this Word version, what might be helpful for you is to determine some sort of color coding system. So maybe you want to make literature and evidence purple, citations and referencing red, just so that visually, as you look down over this column, the longer it gets, you'll be able to see the main things that are coming up more than once. Finally, a few quick general tips for using a writing feedback tracker. 1, make sure to save the tracker somewhere where you'll be able to access it regularly and easily. So your OneDrive account or cloud storage can be good for that. Second, the feedback tracker only really matters if you actively use it to improve. So once you've identified a priority improvement area, try to sit down and build some time into your schedule to do a bit of development work. So maybe that's watching some academic skills videos, maybe it's reading some guides, maybe it's meeting with one of your faculty and asking if you can study any exemplars of best practices for a certain skill. So try to figure out a plan to help you develop in that area so that this doesn't just become a giant list that you don't do anything with. All right, third, related to that prior point is, again, that you do have to use this. And one of the best ways you can do that is when you receive a new assignment brief, use that as an opportunity to have a look back over your recent feedback. So you've read the assignment brief and you know what you're about to start doing. But go ahead and give yourself a refresher of where maybe things didn't go quite how you wanted last time. So if you can see that last time you lost points because the depth of the research wasn't sufficient, now as you set out on your new piece of writing, that's a timely reminder to go into more depth, spend more time in the databases, add more sources to your bibliography, right? So it's about looking at the tracker at the right point in time as well, so that you can improve that performance on your essays and submissions.